Paul, welcome to the show. And normally I say welcome to the studio, but you're hosting me at Paul McFadden HQ.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
And we're looking around at all the different banners and the different things that you've been up to over the years. And I'm sure we'll get to things like Property Protege and Paul McFadden Wealth. But I'd much rather go back to the start and understand a little bit around what shaped you as a young man.
Yes, so where do you want to start? Do you want to start from...
Let's go childhood.
Okay. So I grew up not far from here in the south side of Glasgow. So if anyone is familiar with Pollock, or back in the day, the young team. So Pollock's divided up to all these different kind of schemes. And I always talk about that Pollock today is very different to what it was back in the day. Because back in the day, when I was growing up, it was a kind of scheme mentality. You know, a lot of underage drinking, the kind of usual stuff. I think so many people can relate. So underage drinking, gang fights, taking drugs, getting in with the wrong people. You don't realise that at the time it's the wrong people. It's just that is your norm, you know. So, and it was in a single parent household. So my mum and two younger sisters. So for me, it was a bit of a challenge. 'Cause I never had a father figure around. Although my uncle kind of assumed that role, and I got some really good life lessons from him. But just that environment, it kind of sets you up for most people to go down a path that thankfully I didn't end up going down, and there's a few reasons why. So growing up, really just trying to figure out my place in the world. You know, I was never that good academically in school. You know, having dyslexia, especially around reading and writing and spelling and things. And it took me a long time just to get over that, because no one really knew what a label was, and if they did back then, no one was supporting and helping you. You were just labelled
There wasn't the tech either, was there? Like, even when I was at school, I finished school in 2010, there was like Alpha Smarts and stuff like that, which is like your entry level stuff, whereas now I guess there's a lot more understanding of people being, and they changed the terminology to be neurodiverse rather than like learning difficulties, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I wish I get told that. I just get told I was a problem child, you know, because I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't listening, and I don't know if that's been your experience, but I freaking hated school. I hated it because it was the whole idea of just sitting there listening to someone talking to you, telling you to do things, and because most subjects, unless it was PE where I could get about and, you know, use some physical activity, which I excelled at more than anything else, and just the big subjects like maths, English, all of that kind of stuff, there was just a lot of anxiety around that. And I guess it's down to back then not knowing the challenges that I was facing and how I process certain stuff. So when you start to get told that you're a problem child and you're not focusing, you're not listening, and you're not paying attention for whatever reason, you start to look at, well, you know, what am I supposed to do here? So then that's where you end up, and what happened for me is getting with the wrong people who then accept you for who you are. And that's quite scary, because now, you know, you're in secondary school and you're, you know, and because I never had a great relationship with my mum as well, at a young age, because I blamed her for my circumstances. It wasn't until later in life I realised that she did the best that she could possibly do. I mean, what else could she do when she was struggling just to put food on the table?
There's an ignorance as a child when you maybe look around at your peers, and albeit you said you grew up in surrounded by probably similar families, there would have been people that maybe had a little bit more, maybe more holidays, maybe the fancier designer clothes or bag to go to school with or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you're taking that out on your mum, it leads to a fractious relationship, because she's doing all she can to, like you say, support the three of you.
Yeah, I mean, she did the best she could do, and I always joke about this when I talk about her. But she's a fourth dan in karate, and everyone in the scheme knew her as Mad Liz, right? So everyone feared my mum, including me, because it was, if you ever got into trouble, or, you know, the police had to come around for whatever reason, like, this is just a regular occurrence that happened all the time, or you name it, it was, you knew that you weren't getting typical grounded or get to your room or something. Like, you were literally getting slapped, punched, kicked, right? So it was tough love. So I think, and by the way, I would not change it for the world, because it kind of made me who I am right now. And
you could argue some of that's missing in today's society as well,
don't
where
get me
kids are
started.
given praise for taking part, and even if they are badly behaved, they're told, "Oh no, don't worry."
Yeah, I think that we've got a very fragile culture these days where people find it difficult to. I think people need to dance around how you respond to someone, you know, and that there has got its own issues as well. I think, you know, anyway, we could get into that as well, because I think it's a topic that really needs to be discussed these days, because having other businesses that focus on helping young entrepreneurs. It's one of the things I need to talk about on a regular basis to get them to think differently, because, you know, I think we're losing the older way. It's even hard for me to even say that when I'm only 37, but and the older generational way of just getting on with things and not taking everything too personally and being far too fragile and not liking, like, I always talk about iron sharpens iron. You need some sparks in a relationship. You need some sparks in whatever relationships you're in, whether it's your life relationship or business partners or, you know, discussions, difference of opinions. You kind of need that.
You should be able to have confrontation. And,
yes.
And it definitely shapes you. Like, so I know difficult conversations I've had in work, I get on better with my clients off the back of it because we both know where we stand.
Yeah.
They know not to take the piss, whereas like not to get completely sidetracked, but if they're demanding a discount all the time and I just always give them and accept it,
yeah,
I'm on my knees and the dynamic is just all wrong. And like you say, growing up, if there's a physical element and an element of like threat, that leads to some sort of respect as well, and also kind of pushes you maybe to not cross the boundaries as much as you might have done, Paul.
Yeah, so that was the thing. It was like the fear of, I don't know if I want to go and do this, you know, because I know you're going to get into trouble, because the thought of, well, I know my mum's going to act like this as well.
What male role models did you have then? You said your uncle was one. Was there anyone at school, like a teacher that you looked up to?
No, I mean, the only person that was, I mean, my grandpa was a role model, but he passed when I was about 15, 16, and he wasn't the best role model, but the role model of just keeping me, again, I think it was a lot of stuff he instilled into my mum in terms of your manners, in terms of how you treat other people, so that kind of good stuff. But my uncle, he was the one that because he just lived around the corner, so he's the one that, and two things he instilled into me. I mean, there's many, but two things still to this day that are so big in the sense of my values and what I believe is so important. He always talks about, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Be a man of your word. And that's quite powerful, because I feel that so many people say they're going to do something, but then don't do it. Or, you know, and I learned that a lot in terms of harsh reality, when I'd say I'd do something and not do it, and he would, you know, hold me accountable for it. And
that's another thing that's gone in society, personal accountability for what you can always blame different circumstances.
And I was that guy.
Interesting.
Like, you know, so I blamed everyone. You know, I blamed my mum for not, you know, having a father around. I blamed her for, you know, not having enough money because I saw my friends being able to go on a holiday and, you know, having new clothes or, you know,
Nike
whatever
bag to go to school, all that stuff.
Exactly. And for me, it's not as bad these days, because I think these days it's a bit more crazy when it comes to fashion, where you know, I think back then it wasn't as bad, but you could still see who had the new trainers and the new, you know, Nike bag or whatever that may be. And even like when I remember when the PlayStations were coming out, it wouldn't just never be me. I would never get them, so I would always be around my mates, and you know, and I was envious of everyone else. And it's like I want to have these things, and because I never knew any different, I would blame my mum. You're not doing this for me. You don't do that, and it wasn't until later in life that I realised she did the best that she could do. So. But that was one thing that really helped my uncle. And the other thing is, as well, is if you're going to do something, do it with excellence. So my uncle, he worked in construction, and later in my life, in my early 20s, I actually started working with him, which I can get to in a moment. But one of the other things he would do on the side is he would recondition and do up different types of cars. Boy racers type cars, like
spoiler on.
Yeah, I would go to the scrappy with him at the weekend, everything else, pick up parts and all that stuff, come back, put spoilers on, you name it, the alloys. So just from simple things of washing the car, rather than just quickly washing it, he's like, get the brushes out, clean inside the alloys, open the door. Like, he's talking about, if you're going to do something, do it with excellence, you know. And that
high standards.
I know, and I'm so glad that I got that at a young age, because I think that there is missing with a lot of people. People just do a job, and that's fine, but just doing a job is going to get you whatever you're getting paid or whatever that product or value you're trying to give her. If you're just doing the bare minimum, then that's what you'll get. But for those that go over and above and beyond, I saw from a young age, tend to get more opportunities, tend to get tend to just grow further as well, because they're getting, it's not getting disheartened when you go over and above and not getting that positive affirmations back saying, oh, that's great. It's like never expecting that. It's just, that's what you're supposed to do anyway. And I think that for me is important with everything you do in life. Like, what's the point of doing something if you're not going to give it your all?
We're going to talk loads about entrepreneurship and doing your own thing. But I think even people that work in a career, one of the key ways to get fulfillment, if you're not somebody that wants to go it alone and build something, is if you do your day job to an excellent standard, you can at least create that positive feedback loop of, I'm doing my job well, I'm feeling good about the work that I'm doing, I'm finishing things to a high standard, a level of excellence, and then you can go home at night and like sleep easy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you see a lot of people like just ghosting through these 9-to-5s, hating them, and no wonder they hate them, and maybe their heads turned by opportunities to do some of the things that you've gone on to do. But I definitely think that people who maybe self-analyze and realize that they're maybe not somebody that's built to be an entrepreneur, or they've maybe not got the skill sets, they might want to turn to that. If they can take on some of that behavior in terms of, I'm going to do whatever my day job is, regardless if I think it's high level or whatever else, if I do that to a standard of excellence, at least I can be happy and content with the effort that I put in. Whereas if you're doing a job that you hate and you're doing it half-arsed and you're doing a low quality finish on whatever you're up to, of course you're going to have a hard time feeling fulfillment in this modern world.
Yeah. I mean, my mindset is, if you don't love what you're doing, and I get like there's times where you might not enjoy certain things. That is life. It's not just a job. I mean, there's certain things that I run in my businesses that I don't particularly like doing, but it's part of the requirement. Thankfully, there's more upside than the things that I don't particularly like to do. But I think that if you just have those simple thought process with what you're trying to do, especially in the workplace, and I talk about this all the time, it's like, if you're bringing more value, if you're leveling up yourself, if you're going over and above and beyond, it's the quickest way to get that fast track for the next promotion. And if your employer doesn't see that, you'll become more valuable for someone else to then go and secure that person. So it's one of those ones, if you are not getting the fulfillment in the role that you're doing, use that as a stepping stone. You know, look at that as, well, how can I excel? How can I be the best at what I'm doing right now? So my first real job was a storeman for a company that's not far from here, Vista Engineering. And I did that when I was at college at the time as well. And because I wasn't great at school and everything else, I left school as soon as I could, and then get told to go into IT because that's where you're going to make your money. And I just heard money because I knew that if I had money, it would change my circumstances.
Was that something that was always a thought for you? Were you always money-minded?
I think so. I think it's just because seeing how much we struggled and seeing those that had and we never. And that was the biggie for me, because I thought, well, if I just had some extra money, if I had more money, I mean, it was never thinking about being a millionaire. It was never thinking about, making hundreds of thousands. It was just simply having a few £100 extra.
Increased comfort, as that. Tick my major boxes and have enough left over to do some nice things on the side.
Absolutely. And then for me, with that in mind, I thought, okay, well, my other uncle, he was saying, look, go and get into IT, because that's where it's going to be. So that's why I went to, at the time, Reed Care College. And it was during that I got the job as a storeman. So I'm literally stacking shelves, riding around in the forklift and all of that kind of stuff. And using what my uncle instilled into me, I went over and above and beyond. I would be in there early. I would be last out. I would ask if they needed any extra time for me to support and help them. If it was sometimes where they were short-staffed, I would volunteer to come in. Even when I'm supposed to be at college, I thought, no, this is what I want, right? So I would skip college to be in the
because this is paying me now as well, which is probably a key metric for your head at that point.
Yeah, and I honestly don't remember what the pay was, but it wasn't anything worth talking. I think the reality is all it did was to pay for me to maintain my Ford Fiesta at the time, insure it and everything else. But for me, it was like, okay, well, if I can, and I guess the story behind that, it didn't take me too long before, they were giving me little promotions within to have more responsibility. And I thought, okay, this is actually quite a quick way to fast track your growth within our organisation. And then when I left there, and focused for a year in university, because I went from college to uni, which is now the West of Scotland, used to be Paisley Uni, and get my degree in IT. And at that point realised I freaking hate computers. Like, what am I doing here? Because the big eye-opener for me was everything that you were learning at that time for me at university was operating systems that were already out of date. It was old ways of doing things. I could start to see technology starting to evolve that I'm like, well, what's this stuff I'm actually learning?
The course had been written and produced, but technology had moved faster. And during that period, technology's moved so quickly. Look at the phones that we've got compared to even 15 years ago. It's radical.
I know, it's scary. And for me, I remember when I got my first job, 19 going on 20, and for an IT company. And my first job that I was to go to, I was having all sorts of anxiety, and I was like, couldn't sleep that night because I got told I had to go to a certain place, I had to install a server, I had to put software in, a whole bunch of other things, and I was freaking out. And I arrived there the next day with not much sleep, thinking I'm going to lose my job already. They think that I've got a degree and I'm experienced, yet I've learned nothing. And it was so funny because as I showed up early, because that's kind of what was instilled into me. And I went in the server room, sat down behind the door, literally started bawling my eyes out, like, fuck, what am I going to do? And the next minute, the door kind of shoved against me. And I got up, and it was one of the other guys for the company that I started work that came in. And he asked, "Oh, you Paul?" And I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Great, you're here to shadow me." And I was like, "Thank fuck," because there's no way. I thought I had to go do it myself. I thought I'm going to lose my job the first day.
There's going to be some buttons pressed and some alarms going off.
Yeah, so that was interesting. And then for working in IT, every day just reinforced that I didn't want to be here. But back to the example we're kind of sharing here, I use it as a platform. So I thought, what can I learn out of this? What can I do? And I was always inquisitive, even to this day still am. I would ask people questions and like, how did you get to that promotion? How did you do this? And that was an eye-opener for me because...
People like talking about themselves as well. I found that out over 180 odd episodes in the podcast. People like to share their story and share wisdom to some extent. And like your uncle shared wisdom with you, and you were just gathering little tidbits from different people you encountered as well. Yeah,
no, it's so true. And for me, I would go to the most senior people in the IT company, and I'd ask them, well, my uncle said that this is where you make the money, so let me, test that out. And I'd ask them questions like, how much money do you make in your position? And how many years did it take you to get there? And I'd hear things like 20, 25 years to get to the 50, 60K a year. And that was an eye-opener, and I'm like, yeah, this is not for me. I'm already hating computers. I don't want to be here. And I don't want to be working in this that I don't love for the next 20, 30 years. Even if I had to half that with being an excellent employee and, going over and above, I just did not see that path. And then trying to earn that kind of money for me, which was so ignorant to even consider or think this. Because back then, I was on 15 grand a year. That was my salary. So me turning my nose up at 50, 60 grand a year was just ludicrous. But in my head, I'm like, no, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to work. You knew
what was required to bridge that gap, and it wasn't a price you were willing to pay for that level of lifestyle.
Yeah.
A really good framework sometimes, and a number of my guests have shared this when they've maybe gone self-employed. Look at what your boss is doing. What's their lifestyle like? What's their relationship like with their wife and their kids? What's their body like? Are they healthy? Do they drink a lot? Do they smoke a lot? Do they sleep much? Would you pay the price that they're paying to get that job and that package and that remuneration and that lifestyle with the effort that might be required to close that gap? And what are the timescales on it?
Yeah.
If he's 20 years older than you and he's living that lifestyle, would you swap places with him? And yes, you might be an outlier to some extent. Like you say, you could have probably closed that gap faster through diligence and hard work and maybe a little bit of talent that you were able to showcase. But it wasn't the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's just looking at, as you kind of say there, looking at those that are so further ahead the journey that you kind of want to travel. And it's key to make sure that that person's kind of got a lot of things figured out, not just being great at making money or, being great at this thing here. And it's quite hard to be an all-rounder, let's face it, because when you get people who are dedicated and obsessed about a certain thing, they kind of go all in on that thing to the expense of other areas of their life, sacrificing family and everything else. But at quite a young age, I realised that, sure, I'm going to have to be obsessed with this idea of making money and building a business, and made a lot of sacrifices, but quite quickly realised that if you don't have the health to go along with it, then what do you truly have? So you have to really start focus on looking after yourself, and and how do you make those strategic investments with the money that you get, and more importantly, what about your relationships? So I started looking at that, a bit like you said, those in the senior positions in that IT job and other companies I work with, they weren't looking after themselves. They were always complaining about spending a weekend with their family. So there was a major disconnect. I thought, well, success leaves clues.
Yeah.
And if that's the path, it's not for me.
Big Jim is on 60 grand a year. He drives an 8-year-old BMW, and he's got a bad back, and he's just been divorced for the second time. You're like, you know what? Probably don't think it's worth what you've achieved.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What came next? The events business? Was that events promotion you went straight into?
Okay, yeah. So when I
Were we going to skip that one?
Oh God, that's a laugh. So that was my first entrepreneurial journey.
Okay.
So
was there anything before that that pointed to
in terms of a business or anything? No.
or
So I
entrepreneurial spirit?
I mean, there was entrepreneurial spirit stuff that I think I did, which a lot of entrepreneurs say, like having the usual paper rounds, you know.
Yep.
So I was always quite proud of that because I had 4 paper rounds, of which I only did 1. So I had others, including my 2 sisters, doing 2 of the others and someone else. So I was getting money off of them, making money too, which I think was pretty entrepreneurial. And then again, for where you grow up in the scheme, you know, you kind of get involved in all sorts of wheeling and dealing where you can. And you know, back in the day, you used to be able to, you know, when we had decks, I used to, I won't even say I was a good DJ because I wasn't, but I used to have my mates round, a couple of them who were good DJs. I used to have good records and stuff, happy hardcore stuff and everything else. So we would record mixtapes. I'd be selling the mixtapes and the CDs when they came out, and that was a big thing as well. So, you know, being involved in all of that stuff to just make some extra money over and above everything else.
And when I was doing my research for this episode, I found out that you were charging inflation adjusted prices for showing off your guy around bonfire time.
Oh God!
Rather than penny for a guy, you were pound for a guy.
That goes younger again. I mean, I just thought like my whole mindset is, and it's how can you? So it's so simple for me. Like I understand this. If you just watch what other people are doing, it's easy to see the results. So I thought everyone who's doing penny for the guy is an example, and everyone was doing it. It was a big thing when I was growing up, and I would see them all outside the local shops. So I thought, okay, and I would ask them questions like that, inquisitiveness again. It's like, how much money do you make and everything else, and how much are you getting? And I thought, why don't I just go out at an actual, you know, supermarket? So I would go to like Sainsbury's or, you know, stuff like that and be out there. And why a penny for a guy? Why not say a pound for a guy? You know, it's and that was just my thought process. And we would make, you know, me and my mate at the time, we would make anywhere between, you know, a bad couple of hours, 60, 70 quid, you know, and as much as 150 quid, which is just ludicrous. It's just stupidity, you know. So yeah, so for me, I was just looking at, I could see other people doing things, and I thought, is that the result that I want? Because there's so many opportunities. Even to this day, there's so much opportunity. I get presented opportunities all the time, and I look at them and go, of course I know, because I'm entrepreneurial, because I've got resources now and everything else, I could make that a success. But does it interest me? Is it enjoying? And what can I do differently? And if I don't see an angle that I can make it different to stand out, there's just no point. I don't want to be just another company that's making money, because there needs to be a bit of fun in there and doing something a little bit different as well.
Yeah, and that's the opportunity. Like, there's very few original ideas now.
Yeah.
But if you take 80% of what you see the rest of the market doing, and then 10% is, I don't know, a slightly different twist on it with some innovation, and then the other 10% is your personality and your skill set.
Yeah.
You've got a pretty good split there in terms of, yes, there's proof of concept, because 80% of this is what the rest of the market are doing, and then you've got that 20% differential, which is going to allow you to have massive success in comparison to somebody else.
Yeah. But that was that time when I was working in IT and hating it. My mate had trained with the likes of Paul McFadden, Richard Bandler, all these kind of people, and learned hypnosis. And he was doing hypnotherapy, helping curing people's fears and all this kind of stuff. And he was doing quite good at it, and taking on some side gigs of doing shows, you know, for corporate gigs and everything else. And it was around about that time, and I was hooked on this whole idea of mind control and hypnosis. I'd be like, can you show me how to do all this kind of stuff and everything else, and fascinated with it. And he's like, oh, you can help me, you know, like promoting some events. I'm thinking about doing this. So that's when I quit my job in IT to become an events promoter with no experience, nothing at all, and using the social media platform back then called Bebo.
Yeah,
familiar?
Bebo. Yeah. You could share the love, and you could have, what was it, like another half or something like that? You could have, like, a top 16 friends and all that kind of stuff.
So what I liked about Bebo is that I would go to all the kind of colleges, because you can have different, you know, colleges you can go in, and you get access to everybody that goes to that college. I'd be DMing them all constantly about this hypnosis gig that's coming up and everything else. So that lasted about 6 months. We had a few fun, you know, shows, and made some money, a few thousand. And then we had a real bad show that never went well. And off the back of that, the hypnosis guy, he lost confidence in it and didn't want to do it anymore. So I tried a little bit more with a few other different performers because I thought, well, I could promote things. And here's an audience of, students that quite like this, because I saw, being university myself at the time, I thought there's not enough things on, gigs or events for students, and I knew kind of things that they would like. But anyway, it was short-lived, and I'm kind of glad that happened, because off the back of that, it led me to realise I'm not getting back into IT. And in fact, I actually went for an interview and got offered the job, and it was significantly more money than I'd been earning before, and I turned it down to go and work with my uncle in construction, just as a general labourer, sweeping up, digging holes, fetching the coffees. Loved every minute of it, loved to get my hands on things, just working away. And it was through that whole process of, implementing the stuff that my uncle instilled, and showing up and going over and above and beyond. And because of that, after about 6 months of doing that, the labour manager put me through my construction management degree. So I was back to university in Glasgow, Caledonian, for 1 day a week, and became a trainee site manager. And it was during that process is where I started to invest a bit more in education. Seeing ads popping up for different events, Tony Robbins events, Harv Eker events, and personal development and everything else. And I'm kind of grateful that I went down that journey, leaving my environment that I've always been comfortable and used to go to an event down in London, which was a big deal back then.
What event was that?
That first event was a guy called Chris Howard, and it was called Breakthrough to Success. So I went along to that, and it was a surreal experience, because up until that time, I'm surrounded by people who had ideas. You can't do that. You need to do this. You need to go and, get good grades, work yourself up the corporate ladder. That kind of mentality and mindset. That's not for people like us. That's not your opportunities.
That kind of working class phrase, isn't it? Where it's like, oh, that's not for us.
Yeah.
Self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah, and I think that's true to the environment, because if you think about it, it's who's your peer group and who's instilling that into your mind. And it's not that they are doing it in a negative way and meaning to. It's just what they know. It's them, opposing their limiting beliefs upon you, and they only know. So that's a crazy thing. It's like, if anyone, I always talk about the good opinion of other people. Everyone's got an opinion on things, and their opinion's perfectly fine. It's just due to the peers that they've been surrounded with, their values, their map of the world, their self-view.
Their experiences massively shape how they're going to reflect that onto you, but you might be wired completely differently, and that should be allowed as well. And
they just see you for who you are. So my idea, wanting to be an entrepreneur and make money, they just know me as they just like, you're just a little shit, it's always getting into trouble, that can't even read, don't even know how to spell. You've got no chance of doing that. So again, they impose that limitations because they see you for who you are, not who you're going to become. So when I went along to that event with Chris Howard, it just blew my mind. It was just 2 days of completely being out of my comfort zone, being around a very different network of very more positive and upbeat people who are talking about how successful I could be because I'm still young, and I've got all my life ahead of me and everything else. So that the feeling of going to that event was the big thing for me. I thought, I like this feeling. I like how people are making me feel. I like this new knowledge because this is something I feel engrossed in. And then I went down the whole path of, reading all your kind of self-development books, your usual ones.
Before that, were you invested in reading or anything like that? So one event was a big turning point?
I mean, I wouldn't read because of my struggles with it. And it wasn't that I couldn't read. It was just the bigger words. It just became so difficult. So I chose not to make an arse of myself and not to look stupid in front of my mates just to not read. But because I found something that was interesting, and reading these personal development books, I felt, I can actually learn this. This is not as difficult as I first thought, and there's no pressure. I'm not reading this book for anyone else. I'm reading it for me, and that's how I kind of started to get better at least reading, which is good.
Why this particular event then? There must have been something about it that triggers you to take action that's genuinely uncomfortable. To go to London, for example, is still a big time commitment, a big expense commitment probably as well.
Yeah, because one of my other mates as well, we live just across from each other. And the mutual connection was he was really good as a DJ, so he was one of the guys that I spent a bit of time with, a couple of years older than me as well. And it was him that said he was going to it. He'd already embarked on the personal development journey a bit before me. and it was just a throwaway comment that I'm going down to this event, you know, you should come along and check it out. And I think at the time I thought, well, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained, let me just go down and see what it's all about. You know, it was a free event, you know, I just had to cover my cost to get down there, which the megabus, oh my God, that was a fucking nightmare as it is, you know. And then staying in the Lily Hotel, which you just wouldn't even send the most hated people in your life there. It's that bad, you know. Oh my God. So you're literally getting down there on the cheapest budget you could possibly do. And anyway, mine was blown, and that was the start of my personal development journey. But the big changer for me was going to a T. Harv Eker event, which was called the Millionaire Mind Intensive, and just the name of the event hooked me. You know, I want to be a millionaire one day, so that'd be amazing. And then going to that event, that was the big changer for me.
What was he talking about?
Again, it goes into a lot more personal development and a lot of victimhood as well, and that was a big realization for me. In the sense that you need to take 100% responsibility of the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, don't, you know, pass it on to anyone else. Don't be the victim who blames, complains, justifies. And I'm like, shit, this guy's talking to me. He's identifying me as the victim. I've been blaming everybody in my life for where I'm at and not having. I had such a shitty attitude. Honestly, like I'm glad that video phones weren't a thing back then, because looking back at me growing up, you know, what a shitty attitude. Incredibly entitled, you know, thought everybody owed me something. I mean, I really didn't like the me back then, you know, and I think that's why I would take drugs, that's why I would drink, that's why I would just, you know, have that hard relationship. My mum would just leave the house and maybe not even come back sometimes, just so that I could sedate from my reality in life. And then going to these personal development events got me to realise, no, there's another way of doing things. There's a reason why I'm sedating, and here's another solution of not to. Here's how you can be a bit more proactive with your life. Here's a different viewpoint. Here's some life lessons. And I started thinking, wow, it's within. Okay, so if I can start, you know, working with my emotions, if I can start, you know, taking responsibility, if I start realising that, you know, where I could actually take my journey in my life, it's up to me, it's no one else is going to do it for me. And it's just those empowerments that kind of get you to start thinking differently.
Empowerment was the main word that was just ringing around my head as you were speaking there, because so many people embrace that victim mindset and they do sedate themselves. I think there's an element of like society being comfortably numb. Yeah. Netflix, Deliveroo, fast food, vapes, booze, drink, drugs, whatever else you're consuming to just get through the day, or turn up to the job that you hate, straight back on your phone, consuming TikTok, which throws stuff at you, which entertains you for another couple of hours, and then you roll over to your bed, and then that's you out like a light. It's really, really tragic. And when you have moments that allow you to look at that and understand that this isn't the path that I need to be on, I think that's so powerful. And I think there's so many different ways that people do that, whether it's a book, a podcast, an audiobook, an event that they attend, even a conversation they have, maybe a hard conversation they have with a friend. That's vital. Yeah, I think that's the challenge these days as well. There is so much distractions available, and they're addictive as well. If you were being conspiratorial, you could argue it's by design, because there's so much stuff that just allows us to just coast. Yeah. And we can be supported. Like, there's a lot of people that are talking about universal basic income coming in for people, and I think with C19 and furlough and stuff like that, it was almost like a trial run of like, you don't need to go to work too much, don't worry about it, you get paid your set amount, just sit at home and behave yourself. Yeah. That's worrying, because people accepted that with kind of open arms. Yeah, and unfortunately that there, if you think about it, you're that's just, it's going to breed a lot more depression. It's going to breed a different mentality that I think is a downward spiral for what we need. Think about it, the economy can only thrive if people are producing. You need the economy to produce, and that thought process and going down that route leads to a lot of unproductive people, you know? Unhappy people as well, which is the massive thing you said there about depression increasing, because if you're not feeling purposeful in your day-to-day actions and having something to work towards, particularly as a man, if we were to do gender roles, it's nice to have something that you're working towards and building for yourself, your friends and your family around you, and you being a supportive figure within that. Yeah. And if that's stripped from you and you are sat at home sedating yourself with all these different vices, it kind of strips you of a part of your identity and your evolutionary kind of desires that are still very fundamental. Yeah, it's so important. I think that
in my opinion of what is life and what's your purpose supposed to be, it's about progress and expansion. It's trying to be a better version of yourself. And I think that that's what I learned a lot through personal development. And that is that the person I am today has got me to where I am just now, through the choices that I've made, the decisions I've made, the actions I've taken or inactions. And it's taking that full responsibility. And I always say this, like where anyone is right now in their life, in terms of the income they've got, the relationships they have, their health that they've got, you know, like every single thing that they have in their life right now, it's a case that they should be celebrating that. And you might turn round, because this is what kind of gets said to me, and I'm like, well, I don't particularly like the situation I'm in just now. He says, well, Paul, you should celebrate. I was like, well, why? He says, because you created it. Everything that you've done up to this moment has got you here. And as soon as you take ownership of that and the realization of that, it means you can decide to keep on doing what you've always done and get much of the sameness, or you start to do other things that's going to take you to down a different path. So for me, it was all about how can I grow as a person?
Yeah, amazing. So you're going through your trainee site manager course at uni.
Yeah.
You've been to Harvecker. You've been to this course in London as well, this 2-day.
Yeah.
Things are changing. What's opening your eyes to what kind of comes next?
So part of the Harvecker training that I did, I got enrolled into a whole bunch of his packages. And that's kind of crazy story because I never had the money for it. So, you know, I got my girlfriend at the time to put the £500 deposit down for me, thinking that that was the total amount, but it was £8,500. So I had to come up with £8,000 in 6 weeks for someone that's never had that kind of money. You know, it's a big thing to go and try and get that money. But I'd sold my records, I sold my decks, you know, I took on some extra overtime, and then I don't recommend anyone does this. It's just what I did. I took out a loan, credit card, increased my overdrafts. You know, I was in 40 grand of debt before the age of 24. You know, so that was just prior to that, but I was just taking out all sorts of debt. And the challenge is for me is that not having money, and then it's so accessible back then, getting credit cards, store cards, you know, and then you're not using that money to put it against something that can give you a greater return. You're using that to spend on things like my Ford Fiesta, the insurance, clothes, you know, going out for the weekend.
There's no ROI on that, is
exactly. So the point is that those bills need to be paid, and I found myself, you know, missing all sorts of payments and starting to affect my credit at a young age. And thankfully, a large portion of that was investing in my education, not just the Harvecker stuff, because there was other programs I started to invest in with Tony Robbins and stuff. Because, you know, I became obsessed with trying to educate myself, and through a lot of those events were business type events, and learn about marketing, learn about sales. And in reality is that who I was back then, a lot of the content was lost on me. You know, I think that I was probably getting information before I was ready to receive it, but the fact that I was tapping into a lot of this and really starting to learn more about business, I thought, this is kind of what I want to do. I want to get more involved in that. And I saw in the newspaper there was an ad for an American company that was coming to the UK to talk about property, and I thought property might be something I want to do, because I saw the Sunday Times Rich List. This is me pulling back a wee bit because I was still young. Like, this was kind of running simultaneous as me going through all of this journey. And I went along to so I saw the Sunday Times Rich List that talked about the top 100 rich people on the list. 80 of them, so 80%, had either made their money through property, or whatever they had made their money invested in property. So that always kept on, you know, in the back of my mind. It's just a little seed that property is something I should do. So along this whole journey of personal development and try to figure things out, being in construction, as that's all happening, you know, I start getting involved in my property journey along this on the side, just trying to figure out how can I actually do this, you know. So going to these personal development events empowered me to really give it a go, because growing up I was self-conscious. You know, I was socially awkward with other people. I found it very difficult to look someone in the eye and to actually engage with somebody and have a decent conversation, you know. So going to these personal development events and being forced to communicate and doing different, you know, experiential exercises makes you come out of your comfort zone, makes you come out of your shell a little bit more. So off the back of all of that, and having the energy of coming from those events, that's the big take home. Never mind the knowledge that half of it was going in, half of it was going out. It was me feeling upbeat and excited about life. So when I went to view a property with an estate agent, they'd be like, oh my God, this young lad's got so much energy, he's vibrant, he's definitely going somewhere. And that came off when I went to property networking events and everything else.
This guy's different. This guy's investing in himself. And even if it wasn't all going into that stage, like it was almost like a fire hose approach.
Yeah.
So you were trying to drink from a fire hose. There was so much coming in. It can't all go down your throat, but enough of it was going down your throat to change the Paul McFadden that people were maybe seeing.
Yeah, so that was the first eye-opener for so many people around me, and where the first step of resistance kicks in, because it's that you've changed. You know, you think you're better than us. You know, it's not that. It's just because you're going through a different life path. You know, you're grown as a person. And that's the thing a lot of people need to realise, is that those closest to you, you're an extension of their comfort zone. So if you stretch your comfort zone and become different to them, that makes them feel uncomfortable. And that's why that resistance comes up, and people think that, you know, for whatever reason people fall apart. It's just the evolution of growth, isn't it? So through all of that stuff there, and while working in construction and being empowered, going on all these personal development events, everything else, is where I started building my property portfolio. And property is what I knew I wanted to do. And not to get caught up in the semantics of property, because I never had the money, you know, I never really had the credit and stuff. I focused on a strategy called deal sourcing. So I'd find a property, sell it on to someone else, and make some money. And that's what kind of got me started. And I got good at finding deals. I would be obsessed in the evenings of viewing properties. I would be, you know, researching on Rightmove. I would be, you know, I would speak to different estate agents, speak to other property sourcers, and I would get good deals. And then I thought, well, I want to start building my portfolio. So not having money, I would go to other people that I met and say, look, I've got this opportunity. If I bring it to you, if you put the money in, you know, we could split this asset 50-50 in the income. So that's kind of what I did. I've got the mindset of 50% of something's better than 100% of nothing. So deal trading gave me some cash flow, and then build my portfolio. So it was until I was working in construction at the time, trainee site manager, and actually enjoyed my time working in construction. And then I remember when property number 10 was about to transact, and my share of the income of those properties, I owned one in my own personal name, and the other 9 was with other people. So my share of that income was just a little over £2,000 a month. And I was making more in construction because I was doing a lot of overtime, but I thought that there covers all my overheads, all my expenses, and it allows me to give this another crack.
So what's called lean financial freedom. It covers your bills, and you're able to exit from the rat race.
So that was it at 24, and property's been my main thing since then.
Yeah. Interesting thing on the deal sourcing. I know we don't want to get too much into the minutiae of property, but ultimately with your investment in yourself, that enabled you to be a successful deal sourcer, because the socially awkward, shy Paul was never going to get people to invest in him and go follow his opportunities. You probably weren't going to build a dynamic required with estate agents, with people that you were contacting about their property that's maybe not listed on the market or not available and not in plain sight.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't invested in yourself, you wouldn't have had the opportunities which became available to you through the force of your personality, your energy that you started to build by the age of 24.
Yeah, I think that, well, that's right. And a lot of the stuff that I was learning, because remember the content that I was taking on board was going over my head, most of it. But I thought, if you can get good at building relationships with other people, that's the key. I'm not talking about superficial relationships, because so many people have relationships with people online and social media, and it's very superficial. It's hard to build a strong, deep-rooted relationship, and it takes time to do that. But I got very good at it, and it's because I took an interest in other people, and I would be positive and upbeat. I wouldn't be bitching, moaning, complaining. You know, I didn't want to be that negative guy. I'd always look at the positive opportunities in life, because I was a negative guy. I was the person that complained, bitched and moaned.
Yep.
But the personal development got that out of me, and I thought, I don't want to fall back into that trap. You know, so people want to be around that type of energy. And that there meant that being a young guy in property, which back then, this is going on almost 20 years ago, like, there wasn't any younger people involved in property. I was the youngest guy that I knew of involved in property for a long time.
It was quite an old industry, wasn't it?
Yeah, mainly male dominant. You know, everyone's suited and booted, very different these days. But back then, that was it. So for me, I guess I was, got accepted in there because of my energy and everything else. And And I found it easy to from someone who found it difficult, but through that personal development, found it much easier to build those relationships. And if you are building those relationships, then it's relatively easy to get people to want to do deals with you, especially when you can find the deals. So that's what I always say. It's like, if you can get like, the best example I can give, right? Let's look at it as a sports point of view. I wasn't the most sportiest person, although that's probably what I excelled at in school. There was other people who were far better at me at football or other sports things. And let's say we're going to go and do a certain run, a marathon or something like that, where you had to go and run. For me to go and do that, I'm the type of guy that needs to go and put the work in, the practice, the time, everything else. Yet, we all know this, or at least I think most people do, but I always know there's this one guy or one girl who does not need to do any of that training. They can just show up after broken sleep, having a bunch of junk food the night before, and run that marathon. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to put all this hard work, time and prep in. And I found that in my whole business journey in the early days, is that I was the best prepared in everything, and other people would half-ass things. Their business would be all over the place, but they kept on getting deals. And I thought, why are they standing out? I know more about them. And I realised, again, because I'm inquisitive, they were just so good at building relationships. So that's because I took that on board in a big way, that if I just get good at building relationships, then all that other stuff that operates and runs a business, that can come later. Because if people want to do business with you, people want to buy from you, people want to invest with you, people want to partner with you, that's a relationship thing. You know, it's crazy to think that there is a key to everything that we do.
Yeah, there's always going to be outliers in your field as well. So like the person that turns up and runs the marathon, no problem at all. Like the person that's running this property business but doesn't know their arse from their elbow, but just has the gift of the gab to some extent. And that'll carry them up to a particular point. But you can only be the best version of you, and you knew that to be the best version of Paul McFadden, you had to do the work and build the ability to build these relationships in order to excel. And like I've told this example in a few different podcasts, but when I first started doing new business and cold calling and prospecting and work, the first year myself and my Welsh colleague were kind of top of the leaderboard. The second year they got my Welsh colleague to train the rest of the team.
Right.
But he was from like this small village in Wales, Aberdeen, and he was absolutely crazy. He'd open cold calls with a joke. He would like patter and joke and like just banter the whole time. And his proposals were like just like wacky with like funny photos on the slides and stuff like that. And people couldn't replicate his style because he was unique. He was an outlier. And I'm much more clean cut, corporate, polished. And I knew that I couldn't mimic his style. I just had to work on being the best version of Colin in order to be the most successful person at cold calling and prospecting and closing deals in that space. And I think a lot of people sometimes look at outliers in spaces. So you see people like, oh, Elon Musk only sleeps a certain number of hours a night, and you're like, Elon Musk is one of the smartest people on the planet. Like, he is just built different. You cannot try and copy his framework in the same way that some people would maybe see deal traders now that are running things in a very different way to how you would teach and how you would set people up. And they're like, oh, but what about what he does? And you think, well, maybe he's just built different, and you have to adopt an approach that enables you to maximize your current potential, and your potential might be different to his.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, it's always good you need to be able to back up what it is that you've been able to offer as well, which is incredibly important. So, but for me, it's like, if you can build relationships, it's a difference between sourcing a property and selling it to one person one time, or having that person committed for you to build them a portfolio of 5 to 10 properties, making 5 to 10 times more the money that you can make. And I think that most people, and I say it as in most people, are incredibly lousy at building relationships. And it's one of the biggest problems I see with the younger generation, and it really frustrates me. And I understand and I can empathise with their challenges, but it's nowadays it's like they're just hiding behind a phone. You know, it's not even
keyboard
emails,
warriors.
it's just exactly. And of course you can do you can still make lots of money online, not connecting with people and everything else, but it depends on what you're trying to do and what route you're going down. I mean, you can't beat that deep relationship you can make with some key people. You know,
you'd invested heavily in self-development, how you thought about yourself, your mindset, But I know that you were saying you weren't always the best communicator. You were quite self-conscious. In fact, I've heard you tell Richard that you failed your solo talk in standard grade English. So obviously there was an element of not being a great public speaker. But anyone that's seen a Paul McFadden Instagram post, or even an advert that pops up on your stories or on LinkedIn, you're known as like quite a polished presenter. And like before I knew who Paul McFadden was, if I saw an ad back in say 2020, I always recognised you would say, "Hi, it's Paul McFadden here," and you would open your hands to kind of be ingratiating and to speak. And it's very polished, it's very clean, it's very professional.
Yeah.
How did you work on that?
I guess it's for me. It's modelling. It's looking at those that I want to try and replicate. And keep in mind, it's very different. I think if people are watching my social content these days, it's more off the cuff and more casual, because I'm now feel comfortable with that. But back then, think about it. If you were putting yourself on camera, in my mind, because think about it, it's only been the last few years where TikTok's really blown up to be its thing, and now it's short form content. So with short form content, you need to catch them quick. You can't introduce yourself. But the social content that people were posting 4 or 5 years ago, you had to be a bit more polished. So for me, it was the opposite around. I had to now evolve to be a bit more snappy, hook people's attention, short form, and be a bit more entertaining rather than just being a bit robotic. Because I look at my stuff even only a few years ago, and I cringe. I cringe at it.
I think it's a process, though. I think if I look back at my early podcasts, of course, I'll be like, "Oh, Colin, you were a bit wooden, or you weren't as fluid, or whatever else, or you were stuck to like your questions, or whatever you had." But it's always a journey. But I do think that you going from not being a communicator to putting yourself out there online for years and years and years, and that professional, polished element probably attracts a particular type of people in property as well, because it, particularly in that era, it needed that to build trust, I guess, rather than, because even now there'll be people who invest in courses or education that they don't want this snappy short form to grab their attention. They want the detail, the nuts and the bolts. Depends how their personality is. They want to see beneath the initial veneer. Yeah,
I think because I don't particularly find it difficult recording on camera. I mean, there's definitely times where if I'm trying to get a specific message that maybe needs rehearsed a little bit more, and I hate that kind of stuff. For me, I'd rather just have a concept I want to talk about and then be able to talk about it. And I think that there's a challenge for most people when they're trying to put out social content, is because where's your depth of knowledge in certain things? And I think for me, becoming more sociable and putting stuff out online over the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, I built up a vast knowledge base of what I do in business, property and everything else. So it's not that difficult to record content. In fact, sometimes I feel like, what the point am I even recording this content and putting it out? It's just dumb stuff. But it's not. It's just because I know it inside out. So I think in the early days for me, where my struggles came was speaking in person. That was the scary thing. Recording in front of a camera, funny enough, felt more natural to me because I'm just talking to a freaking camera. But
it's a good way to frame it.
Yeah, but and I know a lot of people are the opposite. So the reason why, going back to my solo talk, is because I'm having to do that in front of a whole bunch of people, and I just folded. I wish the ground would just open up and swallow me. And I remember my first ever event, because I set up the Scottish Property Meet, which was that grew to be the largest property networking event in Scotland, the second largest in the UK, and that was all by utter surprise. I had no idea it was going to take off like that, but I would bring really good speakers to come and speak, and I would be the host, and I couldn't, like, my anxiety levels leading up to it was just skyrocketed, because I knew I had to go on and host. And my first handful of them, I was awful, like a complete and utter embarrassment. And because I'd booked so many speakers and everything else, I thought, I just need to try and get good at this. I need to go through it. And thankfully, every person that was my speaker, they would actually give me a little coaching session, like to help me introduce them and what to say. And they knew that I was nervous and everything else. So they actually helped me a lot in terms of just being a better host.
People in that space like to see others do well, and they've probably been through that. They've done the reps, though. That's the key thing. They'd done those events before. They'd put in the repetitions. So, of course, you rocking up to hosting your first event, your throat's going to get dry, the palms are sweaty. It's not an Eminem song we're rapping here, but yeah, it's certainly the way that it's going, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're quite willing to be like, I've been in your shoes, son. And there's a respect because you're putting yourself in the arena. You're not shying away from it. You're putting yourself out there, and they're like, you know what, I want to help this kid.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And for me, getting that positive, feedback from the audience coming up to me, going, "Oh my God, I could never have done that. Well done." I'm like, "Oh fuck, I thought I was awful," but I appreciate the comments. And then people kept on saying to me, "Paul, why don't you share your story and share a deal that you're working on?" Because I was doing quite a bit as that was evolving. So then I would do that. I would take a 5-minute slot, and I enjoyed it. And then I'd take a 10-minute slot, and I enjoyed it. And then through that process and getting those reps in, I got much better, and I've continued to evolve through that whole process.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And I guess, like, for people listening to this and thinking about your journey along the way, a lot of the time it is just because you did the work, you invested in yourself, and then you actually put it into practice relentlessly. Because you see a lot of people go to these personal development events and then not take any of the action, even the small amount that you said, like some of it was washing over you or going through you were actioning the things that you could action within your control at that point in time, and then maybe you were then ready to take on board the next lot after that.
Yeah, I'm always looking for a return. And back then, when I was investing in these personal development events, whatever they were that I invested in, I never had the money. It was borrowed money, where it was credit card loans, other people giving me the money for those things. So I had to put into action the stuff that I learned. I never had the luxury of, that was good content and not doing anything with it. I had to go and apply that stuff. And I think that when you've got that mindset, and I turn it into a game, everything I do in life, everything that I pay for, I'm like, how can I get that paid for me? What could I do from this that I've learned, or I got this, or I'm investing in this here? How can I make this free? Like simple things like your gym membership, right? So for me in the early days, again, to me, it's so obvious. It's like if you want to build up a network, and especially those who could potentially partner with you who've got money, then there's nothing wrong with the likes of Exercise for Less or Pure Gym. Arguably, it's got better equipment than most gyms, but there's no networking happening in there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to your David Lloyd's, or at the time it was Nuffield Gym.
Virgin Active, that kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
so because there's a bit more networking in there, there's a bit more of a social gathering. And I would then look at the personal trainers who were doing the coaching for the guys who drove the Bentleys or the Rolls Royce or the sports cars. And I would go and get personal training with them. And I know what would happen if I had personal training with them. They would ask, well, why have you got 2 or 3 different trainers? And I would have to tell stories. Oh, because he does this stuff, you do that, and everything else. And then what is it you do? Oh, I'm involved in property. And oh, Mike, you should speak to my client. And I would get all those intros. And through those intros, I did business, and that business gave me enough money to pay for all my gym membership and all my personal training. So that's what I mean about turning it into a game. So it's like I always say to people, and this was a big thing, it changed a lot of my thought process, because one of the challenges that a lot of people have is we have wishful thinking. You might have a vision board, you've got big goals and targets, but you need to go and try and experience it in some way. And if you can try and give yourself the experience, and if it's what you want, you're going to work harder to make that your new reality. And that's why I always say that, go and fly first class, and it's going to cost you a lot of money, more than you would ever be used to the point that you're trying to make sense of it, going, well, that's X amount of trips that I could go. Like, stop trying to make sense of it. Like, that's not the point. The point is to go and fly it, experience it, and then realize, and when you do that, I want that for the rest of my life. I want that to be my new norm. Even though it was a one-time scenario then, having experienced it, it's like test driving your dream car. And I always joke, because there's a young lad that messaged me on Instagram and says, Paul, I know you say it's just going to test drive my dream car, which is a Ferrari. I went into the garage and they told me no chance. And I get that, but go to Knockhill Racing Circuit and race a Ferrari, which will be arguably much better.
Pay for a track day.
Exactly, and you get the experience of it. So if you can experience things. So for me, with everything that I did in the early days that helped me excel and helped me to go over and above the whole ideas of vision boards and goals, is to try and experience something, go and view bigger homes and test drive the Bentley or the Lamborghinis, the Ferrari, like all of that stuff, long before you're even remotely capable of processing how you're actually going to afford the thing. And it's through those experiences that you actually move towards, if that's what you truly want.
Yeah, my immediate thought with that is it's whetting your appetite for one, but it's creating the carrot.
Yeah.
And it's something for you to aim towards. The gym point's really, really interesting, and I've seen Richard replicate that advice of yours as well at David Lloyd, and that's how we started to get to know each other quite well, because we're both at David Lloyd in the West End. But also, do you know much about the Gymshark story in terms of like Ben Francis and what he's built there? He and Lewis Morgan were training at David Lloyd Bromsgrove in Birmingham, and they approached a guy called Paul Richardson, who went on to be their chairman, just because he was the business guy in Birmingham. He'd built a load of different waste management businesses. I've had Paul on the podcast, and he was speaking about the fact that he was talking to these two young guys that had created this clothing brand. They knew that he was a wealthy guy because he had a nice car in the car park, and they was able to talk about stuff. And then the additional guy, it was the kind of older, more experienced guy that joined Gymshark as well, was Steve Hewitt, and he also trained at David Lloyd Bromsgrove. And so you were surrounded by people that had done things and could build your network and ask questions of different things. And I love being at David Lloyd, not for the equipment, not for the training atmosphere in terms of some of the stuff that I want to do in terms of pushing myself, but I can go down to the cafe and I look around, and there's people around me that I can add to my network. There's people like taking calls on Zoom or Teams with their clients or with their businesses, and you're thinking, right, okay, it's interesting. I'm surrounded by people that I can tap into and build as a wider network of people that are doing things that are of a particular level.
Yeah, that's what I found quite early on in my whole journey as well. So going to all these different personal development events, anywhere that I could get around another group of people who are thinking about growth, personal growth, business growth, because there's so much synergy in there. You're all wanting the same thing, and that's where you really start to build potential collaborations, potential partners. And I love that whole story about Gymshark, and I think that's what people need to do. And unfortunately, I think this generation is shying away from that because they can just be stuck on their phones or their computer or whatever. And in a way that's fine, but those that do get out and actually surround themselves with others and interact and engage and build those relationships, they're going to get far better opportunities than anyone else.
There's a deeper layer to that gym thing as well. Like there's a kind of 5 a.m, 6 a.m club that always go to gyms, and I hosted a gentleman called Sahil Bloom, and he used to go to the gym at the same time as Tim Cook from Apple. And they got talking, and Sahil worked in like private equity and in investing, and he ended up doing investing with Steve Cook from Apple, which is just absolutely wild. So go to the cool gyms and the ones that have a slightly more expensive membership, but also if you're going at particular times, you'll see the same people all the time. And although you might not be on a talking basis with them yet, you'll soon start nodding at each other if you're there every single time for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then you get chatting about what each other do, and you can get a network. Now obviously that's a ridiculous example, but when he told me that, I was just like, right, okay, there's something to this.
No, I love that stuff. I love those stories, and that rings true in my whole life. You know, it's one of those things that you just need to get around other people and choose your locations, you know. And it goes back to flying first class. If you're flying first class, keep in mind the network that's also flying first class and the people that are going to be there too. Use that as an opportunity to network, and who knows, you might get your next business partner, your next deal, your next collaboration, you know. So it means that you get money to be able to make that your new norm.
Yeah, your network now is pretty crazy, Paul. I know you spent time with some really interesting people. One of them's the $1 trillion man, Dan Pena. What was that like?
Yeah. So for those that don't know Pena, he is old school, hardcore, and brutal. And I wasn't sure what to expect, to be honest, because before Pena kind of blew up, he was always doing his thing. I mean, he sold out his oil and gas business in the 70s for just under $500 million. That's probably equivalent to about 3.5 to 4 billion. So crazy back then in the 70s. And his life goal was to own a castle, hence why owning Guthrie Castle in Scotland. And for a long time he would do the castle seminar. And I remember a friend who made a big exit in one of his companies went to Pena, and his mind was blown. And at that time he was doing like the castle seminars for like 10 people, and it was all never ever any promotions or anything else. And then it was through that friend of mine that says you should go along. And so I went before he kind of blew up on social media through speaking on London Real and everything else. But so I had no idea what to expect. I never knew all what people see online of him. And when I went there, first thing which surprised me is because it's very deceiving when you look at any pictures online, but he's huge. He is a big guy. I'm talking about incredibly tall and thick as well. And I remember him walking down the staircase, and you know, it's the first day we're there. We're all suited and booted because you're supposed to turn up sharp, and you know, and that was a realization. I'm in that room because I'd made quite a bit of money by this time when I went there. I was going there thinking that this guy will show me what to do with my money, you know, because where should I invest it and all this kind of stuff. And so I went there thinking at the time I was a bit of a big deal, you know. I had this bit of an ego, you know, making money, thought I was somebody. And what I realised being at that event is that other people were there. They were fucking big deals. I wasn't, right? I'm like, shit. I thought I was a bit of a big deal, but there's people in here who have sold companies for, you know, the tens of millions or hundreds of millions, like just frightening. I'm like, God, I mean, I'm getting so much from them, let alone Pena. And I remember everyone's just talking, drinks are flowing as well, and everyone just went quiet. And I've got my back to Pena coming down the stairs. And then I was wondering why everyone went quiet. I turned round, and it's the first person I've ever felt their presence before actually seeing them. Like, it's kind of weird, you know, it's like this kind of energy, but everyone just went silent. And he came down, and it was our first time meeting him, you know, and then he just starts just welcoming everybody, but then starting to throw abuse at every single person. So he's profiled everybody because you need to fill out a whole bunch of stuff before. So he knows everyone beforehand, and he starts throwing away all sorts of offensive words, you name it, you know. And where's the fucking Scot, you know, where's the wee Scottish cunt, that's his, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah,
That's
right,
me.
you know. And he's like, okay, and then he just tearing everybody apart, and I'm like, I was not expecting this at all. Like, I'm coming here to learn about business and everything else. Next minute we're getting all sorts of fucking abuse. And then we went for dinner, and it was the most surreal experience ever, because he literally just keeps on offending everybody, talking about how weak we are, and you know, how we're all fucked. And I'm like, what is that? I couldn't comprehend it. And I remember walking back to my room, and I was with two other guys. One guy who had owned a lot of care homes in Miami, and he was going, oh, if he speaks about it again tomorrow, I'm going to fucking hit him in the face. And I'm like, oh my God, this is fucking mad. And I remember phoning my wife now, Alexa, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is the right thing I've signed up for. I hope it gets better tomorrow. And it got worse. It was an 8-day seminar. When I say it got worse, I'm talking about it was brutal. For 7 days, he basically breaks you down. And as much as that it was hard to take, and there was times I was even questioning myself, and there was heated moments with so many people in the room with Pena, it wasn't until the end you start to realise how he's breaking you down in order to build you up, to realise that whatever you've achieved means nothing. It's so insignificant. And when you start to realise that, I left there and thought, yeah, I've been playing it too small. I think I'm a somebody. I'm an absolute nobody, you know. It's time to level up here. It's time to really truly show what I'm capable of, you know, especially around decision making, how everything was a big deal, and you know, and it's just crazy. It's, as much as there was a lot of coaching in there in terms of business and scaling a business, that's not really what I took away from it. I really took away that, you know, you everyone, every single person is operating way below their true potential. And when you start to realise that, and you start to think about why aren't you taking those risks that you think's a major risk, you know, I call it the Sophie's choice. You know, why we, every decision or every choice we need to make, we're making it a Sophie's choice, which is life or death. Well, it's not. Like, it's just not.
It's not that deep.
Exactly. So for me, it was started to change the way I did things. I thought, well, fuck it, let's just go and do some things that are far beyond what I thought was even possible. You know, let's change my mindset and approach to things. Let's get involved in bigger deals. Why have I holding myself back? Why have I got too comfortable? I could definitely take this to the next level. I'm capable of more.
That was one of the things I said to you when we were getting organised for this. You talk a lot and you've coached a lot of people, that kind of 0 to 100k, so like that kind of life-changing, going to 6 figures. But I'm always interested in what comes after that. And I guess for you were already a millionaire by that point, going to Pena's Castle. Yeah. But he was like shaking you to say, no, you're not done yet. There's so much more to come.
Yeah. Because that was a realisation. Because, see, having no money and then having money when you're not worrying about things, like, it's such a great feeling where you do not need to worry about swiping your card, you know, where you're the person that's covering all the bills. Like, it's a great feeling. It really is. You know, but along with that, comes complacency. It comes a new element of comfort. So I was most definitely at a place where I had a bit of a mini retirement because my portfolio was doing its thing. You know, it was getting maintained by the team. I was growing my business at the time there as well. So I had, I had the right staff there and team. I'd started the education side of things, but it was nothing like what it is today. And today it's a whole organisation in itself. But back then I'd kind of started it. I was doing it for more fun. So through all that process, I felt like I was just wandering through life. Do you know that way? And it's a kind of realisation. I'm like, shit, in my head, I had the vision board, right? I had the vision board of a Bentley, a Range Rover, the dream woman of my life, and, the big house. And I looked at my vision board that when I set those goals in my early 20s, I couldn't comprehend at that time how I was going to achieve any of those things. Yet everything on that vision board I'd accomplished apart from two things. One was taking a company public, IPO, and that will happen. That's inevitable in some point in my life. That will happen. It's just not been a focus. Another one was I had a snowboarding character. For some reason, I didn't go down the route of snowboarding, right? But everything else on there in terms of the material things achieved. So at that time, going along to Pena, I'm like, is this what life is all about? Being in your late 20s, not having to worry about money, and, thinking, is there bigger goals to achieve, and what is that, and complacency kicking in, and that comfort, and just wondering. So it was an eye-opener, and it's come back and going, look, let's actually build something. Let's really take it to another level. Do you want to have a legacy? Do you want to be known? Do you want to impact and help other people? Do you want to be remembered for things? And I thought, okay, well, the good thing is now I've got money, I've got the opportunity to really invest in the education side of things to make that world class, to help other people accomplish things too. Because it's great that when you can do it for yourself, but it's even more fulfilling when you can help others as well. When you can start having that ripple effect of changing other people's life, it's the most fulfilling thing you could possibly ever do.
It's funny you say ripple effect. One of my favourite quotes is, a rising tide raises all ships. Yeah. And if you can be the tide, then fantastic, let's bring people along on the journey with you. Of course, only people that are willing to do the work and make it happen as well.
Yeah.
Paul, do you know what some of the key related searches are when you type in Paul McFadden on Google? What else do you think comes up?
Paul McFadden's wife pops up all the time, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Net worth.
Yeah.
Glen Eagles. Yeah. And Paul McFadden wife.
How funny is that?
How did you and Alexa meet?
So during that time, this is the one good thing about being complacent and having achieve what I achieved at the time, because it's ludicrous to say this in my late 20s. It was like a mini retirement. I was going through a period of time where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in my life, because this whole idea of building up a portfolio that was producing an income, and having that there, and losing the I've not viewed a property for over 10 years. The team do that. The team take care of all of that. It's just a process to me now. It's like, that takes care of itself. So back then was a point where I was transitioning out of doing all of that. So the team were organising my buy-to-let portfolio, we're organising my flips, and I'm sitting there a bit complacent, So at that time, I ended up going, well, what if I travel a little bit and do some stuff? So I did a bit of travelling, and one of the places we decided to go to was Costa Rica, and went there. And it was a kind of funny story behind it, but long story short, when we went there, and one of the girls who was also from Costa Rica there, she says, I'm going to meet one of my friends. She's, Paul, you might like her. She's very entrepreneurial as well. She's got her own, clothing brand. She sells bikinis and all that stuff. She's at the beach just now, and she's selling all her stuff. And then we met there, and we just hit it off, and she was just telling me she was there for one day. She thought she was going to be there for a whole week, but she sold all of her bikinis that she designed and made in one day. So she's like, well, I can come and hang around with you guys if you want and stuff. So we spent like a week together, and it was just a great time. But nothing happened in there, although there was just this deep connection, until the very last day. Then, literally the night before we were flying, where we just had a kind of moment at the hotel and stuff. And then I kind of joked around, says, look, you need to come to the UK and spend some time together. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. And then we've just been messaging each other constantly for the next couple of months after that. And I just became obsessed. I'm like, yeah, like she just ticks all my boxes in terms of, the looks, in terms of her personality, her interest. We just connected so well. And I was like, right, look, come over come over and spend some time with you? She's like, I can't, I've got my business over here and everything else. She's like, just come over. So she was supposed to come over for a couple of weeks, stay for a couple of months. And we spent a lot of time down in London at the time, came up here and spent time with my family and everything else. And then we had this back and forth for best part of a year. And then we decided, that's it, let's get married. And we will be, in May this year, 9 years married.
Incredible.
You know, which is amazing. 3 beautiful young daughters as well, who are just amazing, who I just love so much. You know, it's just seeing their growth and going through. So yeah, I am very, very blessed to have someone like Alexa in my life, someone who supports me, gets behind me, pushes me, challenges me, you know, and also is just a perfect role model of what it's like to be a woman who's still trying to pursue her own career and push things and be that mother and, you know, everything else. It's just amazing. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at your personality type and what you've achieved and what you looked for in a partner, because there's so many different schools of thought around what is the optimal partner and support network for a man that is building something that is worth millions and millions of pounds.
Yeah, I think that a challenge for many people is if you're in a long relationship with someone and it's already got some fractures in there, and if you're going to then go and pursue something that's out of the norm where that relationship's been, there's a lot of friction because you're evolving and changing. And I see that with many people. And it's not that you should just you know, quit on that relationship, because I'm one for working on a relationship, you know, and I think that you need to bring your partner along with you in the journey. I was just very fortunate that Alexa from day one was always supportive and would go along with that journey, because she still had her journey which she wanted to go on, which I fully support and back. And I mean, there's moments where we, again, iron sharpens irons, where there's conflict in a good way, because we're having those conversations back and forth and to come to an agreement or whatever that may be. And there's sometimes I disagree with her, she disagrees with me, but the best part is we know what we're trying to achieve. It's for the best of the family. But one of the things I always talk about when people go out in that entrepreneurial journey or looking to do something different, or, you know, making a career path change and quitting their job and going full-time into a business venture, that's scary if you've got a long-standing partner who do want to support and help you, but you're like stretching their comfort zone too.
You said this earlier. I completely see that.
You need to get them to buy into why you're doing it in the first place. And they want to support you, but it feels like a big risk to them. So sometimes about going out there and producing the results and show what's possible before you just go and do something crazy. It's not that they're not trying to support you. You know, there is definitely relationships that people should not be in. They should end those, and that's toxic relationships, and those ones are, I would like to think, are obvious to see, maybe not, but if your friends, people around you are telling you shouldn't be in that relationship, there's a clue. And then those that, because you feel like your partner's not supporting you and having resistance, it's not that. It's because you're stretching their comfort zone. You're making them feel uncomfortable, and you need to be mindful of that as well to get them to support and be behind you without, you know, causing all that friction in a relationship.
And there's maybe difficult conversations to have along the way, and at those points you can maybe understand whether it is just somebody feeling the comfort zone stretched or whether it's somebody that is perhaps a limiting factor. Yeah,
I think what I'm trying to get at here is that, because a lot of people ask me about, you know, I mean, how lucky are you, Paul? You've got a wife that supports you, mine doesn't. And I'm like, no, that's the different way of looking at it. It's not that I'm fortunate that she did from day one. And it's not unfortunate for you. It's just you've been in a relationship with your partner before you started to embark on this new journey, and that's why there's, you know, she might still be a great woman that you have in your relationship. She just needs to be supportive, and you need to be mindful of that as well, because you're about to do something that she probably never signed up for in the first place. Yep. And it's just all the way around. It's the same time when I mean, because one thing I love about what I do for my business is we've got high percentage of women that come through our programs as well, which I love. And I think that's a lot because of, I'd like to think how I market myself, because I really want to be inclusive, but more importantly, I want to support anyone. And when we're supporting a lot of the women coming in, they find the resistance with their husband or their partner too, because it's like, shit, like it's always
it works both ways. It really does.
It absolutely works both ways. It really does. And I love it. I love that you know, when you have a partner who, because there's people who are very fortunate like I, who have got a partner who goes, yes, go for it, do it, invest in yourself, go and try this new thing. What happens if you fail? You just go back to this. And that there is awesome. That's a great clue that you've got a phenomenal partner.
That's unconditional love and support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because it'll come out after this episode. The young guy, Callum Carver, he's 19. He's built big e-commerce business, social media influencer pooling as well. And he is with his childhood sweetheart who he met at high school, and she's been with him the whole time he's been doing his social media business. And that demographic are all very into their TikTok, and there's loads of what's called red pill TikTok, which is like masculinity, and there's an element of that being needed in today's society, but there's an element of that talks about the need to be single when you're building. And I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think if you're building something, sometimes a reason to build it is because of the loving, caring, emotional support that you're trying to create for you and a family, and of course the person that you're with. Whereas some of these guys are saying like, oh no, women are just a distraction, etc., etc. And he's kind of bucked that trend, but he's probably more under the cosh consuming that content to consider being single is the most important thing when you're trying to grow to 7 figures or whatever some of these young guys are turning over at such a small age.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get both sides. I think the challenge is if you're trying to build something and where your energy gets pulled at the beginning. So say you're single while you're building something, then it's a distraction, whether you like it or not, especially when you're young, you know, fueled with fucking testosterone, you know, you name it, going through that whole growth in your late teens, early 20s, even in your mid-20s, it's like you're chasing, you know...
Guys are still behind the curve in terms of maturity. I think there was a study that showed that guys are something like 8 years behind in terms of maturity and like impulse control, which is one of the key factors for successful people being able to control your immediate impulse. So
I think that for me, having, you know, a steady partner that I can invest my time and energy in was always the solution for me. You know, I mean, I've had, before Alexa, I've had challenging relationships and short relationships, and for me, I think I get in that relationship, I wanted to give it my all. I never enjoyed getting the distractions and going out and trying to find a new girl. That just wasn't me, because it was a distraction. And that's why from a young age I stopped going out at the weekends and everything else. And when I was starting to make money, that was a problem, because a lot of my mates that I still grew up with, you know, I fell into the trap of me being the guy that buys all the drinks and
gets the table, gets the balls,
you know, taking everybody away on holiday, spending all the money. And then I remember a mentor at my time says, Paul, are they your real friends? It's like, of course they're my mates. He said, well, look, when the limousine breaks down, let's see who takes the bus with you. So I did an experiment with that, and it was one weekend I decided to say because a whole bunch of us says, look, in our little group chat, I said, look, I'm not going out this weekend. I'm going to focus on the business. And everyone was like, oh, come on, Paul, you need to be out, da. I said, no, look, I'll be out next time, but not this weekend. And I'll check in with them over the weekend. So how was the night out? Was it good? No, we never went out. I was like, well, why not? Because you went out. I was like, I know, but you knew that. You guys can still go out, but who's going to buy the drinks? I went, oh, fuck, right. So that was the
uncomfortable feeling, that.
Yeah, so that was the first moment where I went, maybe this guy's right, that my friends might not be who I thought was my friends.
Equally, if you've behaved in that way, they adapt to that immediately, and they get a level of comfort in that's great, and you create that dynamic of provider.
Yeah.
So they adapt to behaving in that particular way, and like you say, their values might have been out of line, of course, but if you've shaped that through your, I don't want to say charity, but your support, then they just adapt to that quite quickly, because as humans we want the easy path quite a lot of the time.
100%. You know, again, responsibility. So from one point of view at the time, it was very frustrating and annoying, but I created it by allowing it, isn't it? You know, so if you keep on allowing it, then it's going to become expected. And then the following weekend, same story, I'm not going out. And it was very quick where I had the whole conversation, like, you've changed, you think you're better than us and everything else. And that's where I started to really drift and cut a lot of people out of my life, you know, because when you start coming into money as well, you start to find everybody who thinks that you owe them something, or, you know, and I just, it was a time in my life, in my mid to late 20s that I had to cut certain people out of my life, like be brutal about it, because I was just giving money for no reason, thinking I was supposed to do it because, you know, whatever it happened to be, I became like a bit of a charity case, and we do a lot, we really do, and I try and do a lot of it, you know, quietly, because it is a real problem, a real challenge when you start to have money. It really is. Everyone's looking for a handout as such. So it's one of those awkward things, because you do want to support and help, and and I do
You
think
need to
we
be
do a
very
lot.
selective, though.
You do, but through all that whole process there, it's that it was a big realization that there was so much distraction around me trying to build my business, and I felt that if there's got to have a bit of a balance of with your life partner, giving him enough attention and time and investing in them, because I don't look at Alexa as my wife, I look at her as my best friend. She's my best friend, and with that there, you want to improve on that relationship, and
Do you know, because you guys met long distance, I think that might have helped as well, because your time spent would be messaging, of course, but it wouldn't be the courting stage of dinners here and there, cinema trips, or whatever else you were up to. And so you still had time to work on the business, but you were still building this connection. Because you had a deep connection when you met in person, you were probably still building rapport quite deeply over message or FaceTime, whatever you were up to.
I agree, and I think that I'd been through enough relationships to know what I wanted by that time, and I think the same for her as well. So, and the thought of having kids was never even on my mind as well. So it was just good timing. Like, I think about it the same. Like, when I speak to a lot of the younger entrepreneurs, you kind of want a relationship. What I'm trying to get them to understand, though, is this idea of jumping from one person to another person, is probably not the best way, because you're going to have too much distractions. If you want to build something, you're either better to get into a more stable relationship, or if you're not ready for that, then stop thinking about it just now. But again, it's everything can be too extreme.
You can take the advice too far. I completely agree, and I do think that courting, or what I would call maybe even a vetting stage, can be so time consuming, because you're spending a lot of time back and forth, and you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And then you know what not to look for. You know the red flags and the green flags and all that kind of thing, but you can spend a lot of time just back and forth, and then it's wasteful. Whereas if you can be quite selective at the start, and then you just feel it straight away, and you're like, okay, everything adds up to some extent.
Yeah. I think the most important thing, if I was to give any form of dating or relationship advice, is that know what you want, because I think so many people settle. And keep in mind, for this audience, I would like to assume, and for many people that listen to my stuff, they're on that growth trajectory.
Yeah.
So the person you are today is not going to be the person you are in 5 years or 10 years. It doesn't mean you have to wait that long for a relationship, but understand and know where you're going, and factor that in on your choices in terms of your life partner. So an exercise that I did, because again, a mentor of mine had said, it says, look, tell me a bit more about your dream woman. Or hair colour, or height, or personality, or interests, and like going deep in all the details, which in a way seems a bit fucking scary, a bit, getting into that level of detail. And then it turns around and goes, okay, well, are you the person today that would go and attract that person in your life? My answer was not a chance. Okay, so you can either do one or two things. You can settle to have a relationship with someone that's not your dream partner, or you can become the person that's able to attract that dream person in your life. And that was the eye-opener for me. It's like, okay, cool. So maybe I will make better decisions and choices with potential dates, or people I want to spend time with, and look for the right personalities. And if I'm not finding that person just now, not getting caught up in the whole relationship thing, because I'm building, I know where I'm going. And until I become that person to attract my dream woman in time, then that's what will happen. And I think that's why, just perfect timing for me, being in Costa Rica and just connecting so well. Like, every box was getting ticked, to the point I'm praying to fucking God that she is getting the same vibes as I am, because it's just such a great connection here.
And you'd done the work to be the kind of person that would attract her, which is vital, as you've said.
Absolutely. Like, maybe if it was a few years prior to that, no chance.
You might not have had enough about you.
Yep.
Genuinely, and that's a fact, because people can disagree if they want, but there is a such thing as mate value.
Yeah.
And if you're not of a particular value, you're not going to attract somebody in the opposite direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the point of anyone investing time and energy into someone if they don't have something to bring to the table as such?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that conversation. I think a lot of the young people listening to this will be nodding along and thinking about either existing relationships they're in, or considering what their next step might be. You've run some absolutely huge events. You brought Grant Cardone to the UK. We've got the Scottish Financial Freedom Summit coming in June. What excites you the most about that?
Yeah, so I love working with Richard. Richard is amazing. He's probably one of our most successful students in terms of getting started at a young age, knowing what he wants, and then giving it his all, doing it his own authentic self, being him, and he's got a big impact with the young entrepreneurs. Very relatable as well, and I like to think that I am too. But there's definitely an age gap, which I've been clinging on to not to be. But when you're in your late 30s, it's crazy when you turn 37. It's you're much closer to 40 than you were, and it's a realization. And I still hope that my message resonates with a lot of younger people. But I tell you what, his does. So I'm really looking forward to doing that event, because it's been, the last real event in Scotland was the Cardona event, which was almost 5 years ago. And Scotland is crying out for something like this. And I think more younger people, even though we've got tickets booked from people at my age and older, which is great because it's for anyone. And we've got such an amazing lineup of speakers, which I truly believe will really start to ignite a lot of that passion and desire, and for many younger people to want to go do something with themselves, whether it is getting that idea to start a business, or if they've got some business to look at how they can scale it and take it to the next level. I think they're going to get so much from it, because one of my goals when it comes to events is we need to be different from everyone else in the sense of value first. We want to give immense amounts of value, because this won't be the first event. Sorry, this is the first, it won't be the last event. We will be doing this more often. So in order for that to become something that people want to come to, we need to bring immense amount of value. So we've got phenomenal speaker lineup, and genuinely, it's kind of, for me, thinking back with, if I had something like this when I get started, keeping in mind the stuff I've been talking to you about, this is the stuff I'd want to know. I'd want to know a bit about this. I want to know a bit about that. I'd want to know about, and I'm like, this is it. We've created the perfect lineup that's going to give a flavour that people will come along to that event and will know exactly what they should go and do to fit into what they would prefer to go and focus on. And not to mention the whole stuff we're talking about, changing your environment, different networking, meeting other people, So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be the next kind of evolution of entrepreneurs that are going to do things in a big way in Scotland.
All in one room.
That event, absolutely.
If you look at your journey in terms of what role events played and how that shaped your roadmap, you look at how Richard met you through an event. It's quite exciting that other people could be potentially experiencing that as well in terms of building their network at an event like that. Out of the speakers, who are you most excited to see? It's like picking your favourite child, I know, but let me know.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good speakers in there. I mean, Sarah Davis will be amazing, because of the first, young female entrepreneur being on, Dragon's Den as well and everything else. I mean, what she's been able to build is just unbelievable, herself. And I think her story, because I've heard her speak before as well, is very inspirational and relatable as well. So I think she'll be great. But there's some other speakers like Tom Breeze, an example, is a friend of mine. What that guy knows about YouTube and blowing up your channels and everything else is just outrageous, So there's a lot of speakers in there that a lot of people might not even know, but they're behind, and they might be a bit more underground and stuff. But the stuff that they do. Do you
know there's sometimes experts in particular fields, and I use the phrase "if you know, you know."
Yeah.
Because if you're like interested in watches, for example, and you know about Nico who's coming, you really, really know. But if you're not in that field,
well, that's a bit like me. Like for me, like as much as I think watches look great, it's not something that gets me motivated. But what I do look forward to with his talk is what he's been able to build up with his whole social media audience, and what I love about that as well is that you might be sitting there watching, like I was when Richard was telling me we're bringing Nico here. It's like, I love his content, but watch is not my thing. But it's like, Paul, look, see past that, see what he's been able to build in terms of the audience and everything else. That's what he's going to be talking about. That's amazing. It's perfect. You know?
Exactly that. Because while some of the people talking might not be in a field that you want to work within. So previous guest on the show and a good friend of Richard and I's, Fergus Crawley is one of the speakers. He runs these crazy endurance events and lifts these crazy weights. Many people in the audience will never have a desire for that, but there's lessons in that about mindset, resilience, perspective, how you apply that to all the different areas of your life in terms of your mental health. And people will take things from that rather than necessarily the fact that they're maybe going to try and squat 500 pounds and then run 5k or whatever it is.
No, I'm looking forward to his as well. I mean, there's for me, I think a lot of people are going to get different things from a lot of the speakers, which is going to be great. I mean, I get an opportunity to talk about a different, topic altogether that's not profit related. It's talking more about building a coaching business. We've been fortunate to build our coaching business to over 8 figures, and there's a model to doing that. So I'm looking forward to sharing that content, which I think will help for so many people who have some sort of offering that they can put out there and evolve and grow that. And what's the kind of step-by-step process to make that happen, to build a coaching business, you know? So I'm looking forward to even sharing content that I don't normally get a chance to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I want to ask you before we wrap up is, with the Pena event, he forced you to step outside your comfort zone, do things on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
What else can you do now at the stage that you're at, 37, all this success, the different businesses you've got, the portfolio, the beautiful family? What are you doing that's kind of intimidating you that's next?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because it goes back to that whole process that I went through in my early 20s, when I'm mapping out my goals and what I want to achieve, and every goal that I'd put out there was, in my mind at the time, was like, how am I supposed to even achieve those? And then I found myself over the last few years still setting goals and targets, but nothing in there was like, oh my God, how am I possibly even going to do that? So I got a realization about a year ago. I'm like, Paul, what's happening here? Even though I've gone through all these different evolutions of growth, because off the back of Pena, I started to get involved in bigger developments, started acquiring land, taking things through planning, having a number of exits. Now we're on site this year, building our own developments and everything else. And I wouldn't have got involved in that if it wasn't for getting pushed. I wouldn't have done the big Cardona event and the other bigger events that I spoke about if it wasn't for Pena as well. So that was the spark that got me to think bigger and go out and, I guess, take things to another level. And then just last year, I'm like, Paul, what's happening here? I found that element of complacency again. And it's been aware of that. So some of the things that I want to do is that we have, I've got a big focus on the education company, because we've got so much growth in that in itself. I want to bring some more verticals to the education as well. And one of the businesses that I am invested in as a partner is our More Than Academic, which at the moment, they go into schools and help with a lot of their education process, mainly around maths, but also what we're rolling out through that is our financial education for the younger generation. So a big thing that I want to be involved in and doing, which I'm going to play a big role in, is the whole financial education for the youth, in terms of mindset as well as just understanding money. Because if they had the right mindset, that will allow them to excel in their career or to go and do an entrepreneurial journey and set up a business. And more importantly, I've been able to know how to make money, know their value, how to grow money, how to invest money. You know, all of that's incredibly important. You don't get taught this stuff. So my next chapter in my life is to really make a big dent on the financial education stuff for the youth. I think that's a worthy cause. I think that's something that's required, and there's a need for that. And I've got a number of business acquisitions that I'm looking to go through and explore and potentially invest in as well, because I see myself now where, and I think I mentioned it earlier on, I got offered lots of different opportunities, and for me it's being selective, because the initial instinct is, this could be a great opportunity, I'm going to jump into that. But if
Shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it, because it's flying around more than ever, but it's looking at, can I really make a dent in that? Is it something I genuinely want to be involved in? And, you know, does it excite me as well? So there's a few opportunities that I'm involved in just now, which especially one being in the tech industry, which is really exciting, because I think there's so much upside in there, and it's a phenomenal product, and especially everything that's going on just now with AI and everything else, it's quite exciting, you know, and a few other things too. So I think my next evolution is to be growing the business portfolio, and continue to do more of what I'm doing just now, because I'm in a place in my life just now which I genuinely love what I'm doing, and I feel like I've got more energy than ever before to really focus in growing the education company, being able to support and help the other business I'm involved in, you know, to be able to consult there and help those grow. And there's things in my mind like, well, why not be on Dragon's Den? Not as a contestant or someone looking for money, but as a dragon. You know, why not? Why not have that as a big goal?
Yep.
You know, so what are those types of things that I'm kind of thinking about? You know, as much as I've had the privilege to be invited to speak on some big stages, you know, well, let's make that international. You know, why am I not doing this in Costa Rica? Why am I not doing this in the States, across Europe again? So I think that's my next evolution. So we've got some exciting things that my marketing and media team are working on, which I think is going to take our content to the next level, which I think is going to give a lot more value to my audience and to help us grow and expand that. I've got a lot of PR stuff kicking off this year as well, which is comfort zone stretching as well, because it's taking it to a different level, different places where I'll feature and appear, and who knows what the opportunities will come off the back of that. So I'm quite excited about where that can go, and I'm quite clear in terms of what I'm trying to build as a family, and that legacy building and protection, because there comes a certain point where you are building wealth, you've really got to be efficient with that until you set it up in the most tax efficient strategy and protection and everything else for generational wealth. So that's been a big focus as of late, and we'll make some strategic investments. We've got stuff in Costa Rica, we've got land there. It'd be amazing to start building our dream homes over there as well, which is nice. Been over in Marbella the last couple of weeks, staying in different villas, getting inspired by what we could build in different areas, and now we're getting brochures sent for places over there. So hey, we might even have a place over there too. So it's pretty cool that I think it's always important to be driven by material things as well, because I think a lot of people get caught up.
They shy away from that as well.
Yeah, but why not? Why not? You know, of course you should have other goals, absolutely. You know, but no one should feel guilty if they've got money goals or material goals, because that's a big driver for most people, you know. And
there are milestones as well, like particular watches, particular cars, particular houses, particular holidays, particular experiences, which again, I think there's should be a big focus on optimizing for experiences. So like, say I get a boost in my income, if I can maybe use that to take my mum to London to go see some theatre shows and have some nice dinners, I'll remember that forever, rather than if I just upgraded my car a little tiny bit. Yeah. But of course, if we can do things at such a scale, why can't we do both?
Yeah, no, experiences are what it's all about. Like, you can't beat it. And for me, that's what I'm always looking at for my girls, because I know how important your environment is. I know how important it is to be around the right people. I know how important it is to experience things. Like my girls, 2, 5 and 6. Now look at Ari and Hannah, who are 5 and 6. They have a very different world to what I had growing up.
Is that something you're proud of?
Absolutely. And I don't want them to ever be entitled. And we have our own processes to make sure that never ever happens. You know, so we do a lot there. But the whole idea of giving them the fullest life, but knowing that they need to work for it, and we'll do a good job of that, because Alexa's amazing. With what she does in terms of being that mother, and I know what I'll do in terms of helping them, you know, just to see the value of things in life and everything else. But if you can instill that into someone when they're so young, I mean, where will they be when they're 16, 17, 18? It's quite scary, and I'll never force them to go and do anything. I just want to give them the skill sets, the knowledge, the tools, and then they will do whatever they want to do in life with it. So I guess that for me, I will say this for the guy. I mean, I can't speak for a mother, of course not, but I can speak as a father. And this will be a challenge for those that don't have kids, or I don't have any boys, but I know this for the girls. Like if you're a father to girls, it's a crazy thing is that because my girls will be with me for the best part of 18 years, which is normal. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So they'll be looking for a man like their father. That's quite scary when you think about it. So that's why it's so many people get in bad relationships that you can link back and go, you're in that relationship with that person because you were looking like for someone that's like your father to get that comfort, and you look at and see the resemblances. So for me, that's scary as a father. So I need to make sure that how I interact with my girls, their mind, because they're always watching. Young kids are always watching and observing and seeing how I deal with their, interact with their mother, how I'm interacting with other people.
It shapes a lot of things. I had a gentleman called Adam Lane Smith on the podcast, who's a psychologist. He's an attachment specialist, and your attachment style in terms of how you enter into relationships is massively shaped by the first few years of your life and what you witness around you and the love and type of love you experience from who's around you.
Yeah, well, this is exactly it, and it's quite scary, isn't it? So for me, it's like, okay, well, I need to be the best possible version I can be in order. And listen, like, we all mess things up. That's parenthood, isn't it? But if I can be the best possible version of me and be that example to my girls, then hopefully I do a good job that sets them up to have a very different life, and one that anyone can have if they become a bit more mindful and become aware and understand that if you're not happy where you're at just now, it's no one else's responsibility. It's up to you to start making some small changes. Whatever you've done has got you up to the point you are today. It's not going to take you to the next level. Celebrate it. but then let's start looking at what's the next things that we can do to just at least become a better version of yourself 6 months from now or a year from now. And that's the game changer. It's crazy how people are only 6 to 12 months away from their life being radically different from how it is right now.
If you put everything into one thing for 30 days, like an hour a day, you would notice some sort of traction.
Yeah.
If you were doing things correctly. So like you say, 6 months, 12 months could be radically different.
That's crazy.
Paul, great note for us to wrap up on. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
If people want to continue the conversation, where should they head towards?
Yeah, so I'm on all social platforms. If you go to paulmcfaddenwealth.com, that's kind of where we hang out. We've got our different social handles as well. Paul McFadden Wealth across all other social platforms too. Instagram, TikTok, usual places.
That'll be linked in the show notes. Thank you very much to you, the listener, as well. And I'll be back to speak to you all again
Great stuff.
very soon.